You're listening to Astonishing Healthcare, the podcast hosted by Judy Health, focusing on the biggest issues affecting healthcare consumers, benefits plan sponsors, and health plans. We're covering how things truly work or don't in the U.S. healthcare system and pharmaceutical supply chain, and we're doing it in an astonishingly efficient way.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Astonishing Healthcare Podcast. This is Justin Vanieri, your host and Senior Director of Communications at Judy Health, and I'm excited to have Bridget Mulvenna back in the studio with me. Bridget, I've got to send you some swag. You've been on the show 5 times since we launched it, and that was a long time ago now. I think you were episode 2. And then last year you were on a few times, actually, and this builds on those really nicely, so I'm excited for this discussion today.
Good to be here, Justin.
So episode 83, and I'll link stuff in the show notes per usual. That was your PBM versus your bottom line, biosimilars and rebates. And then right prior to that, it was 20 episodes earlier, was empowering plan sponsors. That was about data access and analysis. And you write often about just the things that you've learned over your years working in the pharmacy space, your years being in the seat of a plan sponsor or pharmacy program director, and how to apply those in a better way now that you're on quote unquote, this side of the phone. So I know they haven't put GLP-1s in the water yet. You've written about that too.
Yeah, well, look, when we talked about GLP-1s in 2024, we were not nearly in the place that we are today. And yes, you're right, it's not in the water, but they do have a magic pill now. And I remember saying there wasn't a magic pill, it was a magic shot. And I think there's still more to come in the pipeline for exactly how magic this drug is going to be for people. I know it's been really successful for folks who have type 2 diabetes and getting their A1C under control, and they're healthier and they've lost some weight, which totally helps diabetics, but it is crushing plan sponsor spend and more to come.
And we almost jumped right into it without a bit of setup. That's what happens here when we get on the Zoom. Before we get into the rest of the discussion, just briefly, quick background, your role here. Be great for anybody that hasn't heard you on the show before or doesn't know you.
Yeah, so I am Vice President of National Business Development. I'm responsible for growth in the organization, both regional and national. I've been here now 2.5 years, Justin. Last Friday was my 2.5-year anniversary, which that time really flew by. I have been in the pharmacy industry my entire career and mostly focused finance, operations, supply chain. I am an operational efficiency expert, but also a former plan sponsor where I ran 4 different pharmacy benefits procurements in the 10 years that I was at that organization. I learned a lot about how pharmacy benefits operate from a plan sponsor perspective. And when I was offered the opportunity to join the Capital RX organization, I didn't jump at it at first. And maybe that's because I'm an extremely loyal person and I didn't really feel like it was a good idea to bite the hand that was feeding me and leave that other organization. But after talking to other folks here and other leaders here, I really was attracted to the mission, not just the mission in the moment, but the long-term mission of Capital RX Judy Health as an organization to change healthcare, whether it's changing the way prescription drugs are priced for folks, changing the way PBM members that are actually using the benefit, and let's face it, pharmacy is the most accessed benefit, that are using the benefit, changing the way those folks receive service and the quality of that service, and then now moving forward in this organization, changing the healthcare infrastructure for the company so that we don't have to have all of the gross inefficiencies that exist today. So it's been a really great journey. I have grown a lot in the time that I've been here.
Well, 2.5 years. So maybe I'll just start off there. Like, how's your perspective just overall changed since you joined on sort of how the industry is working and how you think about working with prospective clients and clients once they come on board for pharmacy benefit solutions?
Yeah, so I'll admit something that, probably for someone my age, I should have not been this way. But when I came in here, I was kind of a wide-eyed optimist, right? Like, this was great. I did this for my company. It works so good. This is going to work for everyone. So my perspective coming in was very enthusiastic and naive about the fact that people are ready for the type of change that Capital RX and Judy Health is offering. I don't want to say I've become jaded, but I certainly have learned a lot about what people are actually looking for. And a lot of it is technology, and technology is very important. Access to data is very important. We talked about that last May. What they really are looking for is service and strategic guidance. And so I've shifted my view, my perspective as a sales lead, as a salesperson, to being less like this is the best thing since sliced bread and we're going to solve all your problems, to being more like we might not know what all your problems are and you might not know what all your problems are, but we're going to dig in together. We're going to figure it out. We're going to surface those things and then we're going to implement strategies and programs to help solve that. But oh, by the way, we're not going to come in and just sell you everything we have. We're only going to sell you what you actually need. And most plan sponsors aren't complicated. They need claims administration, they need excellent service, and they need clinical oversight and utilization management of the drugs that are flowing through their plan. And so my perspective has shifted to less of a wide-eyed optimist to more of a operational, strategic realist, and understanding and identifying specific needs of individual clients versus this broad idea that this is going to be the right thing for everyone at this time. And I still think it is the right thing for everyone, but I also know that no organization is able to take on all the business that is offered to them, right? And so it's very nice to know that the folks that are strategically ready to move to a more innovative model, get into the data, understand this type of service that we offer. It's fun to be in the room with those people because when the light bulb goes off and you see them get it, it's like this magical moment. And so it's exciting to see where we are at this tipping point in the industry where folks are like done with the old world, done with the way that it was done before, and they're ready for something new and they're hungry for savings and service.
That light bulb moment must be pretty cool. And I appreciate the shift of perspective. That's very interesting to hear, especially to start off a discussion like this. When people start out that procurement process, and you've run several, and of course here you've run them from this side, you're going in, you're evaluating PBMs, you're evaluating options, trying to figure out what you actually need. What are they often missing? And how do you kind of approach figuring out what will be right for them and their plan?
When a PBM procurement is happening and you're looking at a spreadsheet, spreadsheets account for unit cost only. The thing that is missed is how a PBM manages drug mix. And the management of drug mix is far more critical to understanding what your drug spend is going to be by the end of your first year of service than unit cost. Everyone can offer you a unit price. Is it important whether that unit price is based on NADAC or AWP or wholesale acquisition cost or whatever other pricing metric is out there in the market? Yes, it's important to understand those differences and the idiosyncrasies between those. It's also important to know what your rebates are going to be, but maybe the PBM with the lowest rebates also has the all-in lowest net drug cost. And that is not necessarily being fairly evaluated because all you're seeing in a rate card battle is ingredient cost versus rebates versus total. And in a different model where you're actually accounting for drug mix, you see the value of prior authorization differences. You see the value of whether or not the PBM is allowing you to refill too soon. You're seeing the value of the PBM coupon programs, whether quantity limits and step therapy work. Those things are true and real and meaningful, and they are not always being measured in PBM modeling. Now,
So if you're
some consultants do a really good job of measuring and modeling this. And so I want to make sure to our consultant friends in the community, I'm not calling anyone out. Those of you that are doing a great job, congratulations. There are groups, though, that need to really shift towards this. And the answer has been, well, we'll just move everybody to a PMPM or whatever. That may not always work either because it's hard to evaluate different PMPMs because they have different caveats, different contractual requirements. And so, it becomes this really hard push and pull for consultants to understand it. And so then bringing it back to a plan sponsor, it adds just another layer of complexity for a plan sponsor that doesn't really need to exist.
And like you said earlier, you kind of need, with some of these topics related to utilization management and not to beat a dead horse on any of these, like PA approval rates and all the other things that go into drug mix, you kind of need to have some sort of expertise on your team if you really want to understand what's going on with those things, right?
Yes, because if you're an HR person, a total rewards leader, and you're looking at a PBM who has a lower than average prior authorization approval rate, your first instinct might be, oh my gosh, people aren't getting drugs. When in reality, they're getting drugs. They're just getting a lower cost, more clinically appropriate at the time medication instead of bringing a cannon to a knife fight, right? Not every person who gets a prescription for an anti-inflammatory or dermatological agent that's specialty and costs a lot of money needs that drug as their first-line treatment if they haven't tried a $15 cream, right? And so I think that's where a lot of the value is getting lost. And I want HR folks that are listening to this podcast to understand that lower prior authorization rates don't mean people aren't getting drugs. They mean people are getting the right drug the first time instead of getting the most expensive drug the first time. And that matters. And it also matters if they're getting the drug that they want the first time. Then the next question is how much money did my PBM make by approving that drug? And if it's anything more than an administration fee, if they're making money on the price of the drug, then where is the incentive to approve fewer drugs? And what is that doing to my spend?
Got it. And a big part of the shift here in terms of costs and just what the market's focusing on related to drugs and what drugs, medications members are taking does relate to biosimilars. And I think the autoimmune category is a big one, of course, but the shift to biosimilars. Can you talk a little bit about, qualitatively and what are the takeaways? What are the benefits? What do people need to know about the prices of these medications, the pipeline, et cetera?
Well, obviously, you've got the big heavy hitters that we saw go biosimilar in the last year. We talked a lot about that. It's Humira, Stelara. There is a significant savings in moving away from Humira brand, reference product to the biological agents if the biological agents that are available on the formulary are considered or classified as low WAC, low wholesale acquisition cost. There are still rebates associated with those. There are still sometimes coupons associated with those. And so just making sure that you're leveraging all of the available remuneration that exists in the market for biosimilars is important. The other thing that is very important to understand is that in the early days of biosimilar, the FDA was not approving these products as interchangeable. So it was more difficult to move patients, move members off of the brand reference product to the biosimilar product. Well, now the FDA is approving more and more biosimilars as interchangeable. And you can think of that the same way you think of, when a brand drug goes generic, that generic product now becomes interchangeable with that branded product. That doesn't mean people, doctors, physicians, or members still don't prefer the brand reference product. And there may be reasons for that. And some of those reasons may be valid clinical reasons. And some of those reasons may be based in just lack of information. But biosimilars are, at their core, biologically similar to the reference product. And so it means that they are, in essence, a generic to that brand. And that's oversimplifying. But for the audience who doesn't understand the drug supply chain at the same level as other people, it's important to sort of distill that down. Biosimilars are not going away. We're going to see more and more and more. In fact, this year, we're expecting 2 more to come. The biosimilar pipeline from now through 2030 is extremely robust. And what we're seeing is the FDA fast-tracking these approvals because of the hyper-focus of this administration on reducing drug pricing. And so if the administration is focused on reducing drug pricing and the FDA is going to approve things faster and those things are going to be interchangeable, that's a huge indicator to the market that a biosimilar first approach is going to benefit you financially. But here's what it also does. And we kind of go back to that unit cost spreadsheet. It significantly reduces the value of rebates that you're getting. So you should be asking yourself during a PBM procurement process, is PBM A covering high WAC biosimilars and PBM B covering low WAC biosimilars? Does PBM A also own a white label drug manufacturer that makes one for them? That is their own product. And so not only are they making money on the price of the drug, but are they also making money on the manufacturing end of the drug? Ask yourself these questions because these are very important questions. The bottom line of any PBM procurement is follow the money. You need to know where the money is going in the supply chain. And in biosimilars, if you're not getting a low-WAC biosimilar, which has a little bit of rebate value to it, then you're more than likely overpaying for a drug that is roughly equivalent to the drugs that are available to you in the marketplace. And there's just no good reason for it. And I'm not a clinician.
I love you just that's great. Okay, and so by saying 2 in particular, you mean 2 of the more important ones that we'll see coming to market soon. Is that I think there's a few, like Keytruda has one, Xgeva, there's a couple others, which I'm just curious what you're referring to.
Tremfya and Xolair
Okay.
are going to be big ones, and we're expecting that those biosimilar equivalents start hitting the market sometime later in 2026. So it's just an opportunity to add the low WAC biosimilars only to the formulary and eliminate dispensing of the originator product, and just going to your finance leaders and saying, we're going to have lower rebates, but we're also going to spend less on drugs. Because here's something nobody's talking about. All of these drugs have gone down in price, and we add them to our formulary. When we're looking at an analysis, rebates are still 25 to 30% of ingredient cost. And that's really important to understand, is that the value, the percentage of rebates as a percentage of ingredient cost has not changed, because as ingredient cost goes down and rebates go down, it normalizes. It's kind of a straight math formula.
You benefit from the deflation, basically.
Exactly. You benefit from the lower cost in the ingredient cost bucket. You may lose rebate value over in the rebate bucket, but as a percentage of your total spend, you're still whole. You're just, if your check was $2 million a quarter last year, maybe it's only 1.7 now. But your drug costs might have been 15 million, and maybe they're only 13 now.
Big delta.
Yeah. And then maybe that math doesn't translate exactly, but I was just
No, that's the point. Yeah, it's you got to spend more to save more thing, and the math isn't great when you have 20,000 plan members.
right. And when you look at a rebate guarantee, and you're used to what we saw 5 years ago, $4,500, $5,000 for specialty, that's just not possible anymore. But you also, like Stelara was $21,000 every time it got dispensed, and the biosimilars are in the neighborhood of 4,000. That's a lot of money.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And if you multiply that by the number of members on the plan and the number of times they get it a year, that starts to balloon.
So I've got a couple more big topics. Always thank you for coming on the show and sharing your thoughts. And I know you're busy, so we'll get you out of the studio here. First, plan sponsors, the C-suite. Are people really getting comfortable with the idea of lower rebates? I mean, you just clearly laid out the math. So like, how does this story play out right now in 2026?
There are going to be certain organizations that get it, that just innately understand that lower prices and lower rebates are good for the market, good for the plan, good for the members. There are still some folks that are stuck in that, well, we've become dependent on that number. And what I'll say is they'll get ready someday. Maybe they're just not ready now. I believe that the market dynamics that exist today are going to continue to change, and that the goal might be to eliminate rebates from the supply chain altogether. And so getting comfortable with lower rebates is actually like prepping for the future, because the future is coming, and the future is largely generic and biosimilar. And I say this all the time. Capital RX book of business, our average generic dispensing rate, or GDR, is like 87%. So that means 13% of the products that come out of our formulary and that are adjudicated through us are either brand or specialty drugs. We have some plan sponsors that are up above 90. That's all about plan design and how you want to facilitate that plan design for your members in your plan. The reality is that 87% of utilization is only about 13% of your cost. So I always say, park that 87% of your use in a bucket, and let's really roll up our sleeves and focus on the 13% of use that is 87% of spend. That is where there is a biggest bang for your buck. Biosimilars get you there. Moving from having really effective DAW penalties, where if a physician says this brand product is the only thing that's going to work for my person and here's the clinical data to back it up, then the member doesn't pay a penalty. But if a member insists on getting a branded product when a generic or a biosimilar is available, there should be a penalty. The member should have some skin in the game. And I'll tell you, if your copay is $100 and the drug that you want is $10,000, most people see that price tag and they're like, whoa, I'm not paying the difference between the $100 and the $10,000. So they will go to a product that allows them to pay their lower copay. And so I think it's going to be really important for us to understand the changing market dynamics, that maybe rebates aren't going to be here forever, and that we have an opportunity for the first time in the United States with Trump RX out there and direct-to-consumer programs to develop programs as a PBM that make our members and our plans better shoppers of medication. And I think what you'll find, and I know we don't like to be salesy here, but that Capital RX and Judy Health have amazing tools that allow folks to do that. And you're seeing more and more people push towards healthcare navigation and platforms like that so that they can offer those same robust tools. That really is going to be where the rubber meets the road. If we can get our members to actually shop for prescriptions, then they start to educate themselves on pricing. They'll start to see patterns of pricing. And that's when the industry will start to really shift towards a more consumer-based model. And I think NADAC really supports that.
I think you started to kind of get into the next thing I want to talk to you about, which was the price transparency that we see in the market now just seems to be increasing by the day. Like somebody else notices or talks about the specific price of a drug when it's direct to consumer, cash pay. Trump RX obviously does that. Mark Cuban Cost Plus Drugs does that. There are others too that are trying to be more transparent and clear about what you can get a drug or a medication for. And so I think that's really kind of an astute observation for this year. And we've talked about it a couple of times on other podcast episodes too, where it's kind of changing the balance of power in the market. Could you talk on the GLP-1 side, that price transparency with the pill out now, to build on what you said earlier in this discussion about the cost in aggregate for a plan? It's like diabetes, and there's weight loss, and sleep apnea, all the other indications, cardiac risk. Where do you think the price will go for GLP-1s over time? Are we starting to see some real deflation there because of this transparency we're seeing in the market?
Well, we know for a fact that Novo Nordisk is going to be basically cutting the list price of their products in half. Anyone with common sense who follows the drug supply chain can see the writing on the wall that the other drug manufacturers, and right now the primary blockbuster manufacturer is Lilly, are likely going to do the same thing. Lilly responded about a week and a half after Novo's announcement saying that their new Zepbound Quick Pen product, which is sort of like the Dial-A-Dose, that's what I used to call it, they're going to have a direct-to-plan price where the plan can actually buy direct and cut the middleman out. So we're seeing a lot of this activity around that. I also think that the pipeline for GLP-1s, not just new GLP-1s coming to market, but a new type of GLP-1 coming to market. You've got your single action GLP-1, you've got your dual action GLP-1 GIP, and there's a new one coming out, and I can't remember the name of it now, which is a triple action GLP-1. So we'll see more products available. For a long time, I thought the price would stay relatively the same. Once Novo made that announcement, I feel like the price is going to be cut in half. But let's kick the dead horse a little bit. When the price gets cut, so does the rebate. And so the total rebate value in the brand bucket is going to go down at the same rate that the price drop, or at a faster rate than that. I was very relieved for the market and for our plan sponsors not to see any weight loss or diabetes GLP-1s. Well, maybe Trulicity was on there, but the blockbusters, the Ozempics, the Wegovys, the Mounjaros, the Zepbounds, I was very pleased not to see any of those on the AMP negotiation list for the 1128 implementation. But there is a future that exists out in the marketplace where those drugs hit that AMP cap list. And I think that's probably happening in the next round after this. So I think it's just something to watch.
Okay.
If I'm advising plan sponsors, I'll say, if you cover weight loss, you should also cover the additional indications. But for those plan sponsors that choose not to cover weight loss, I feel like if they don't cover the expanded indications, that it's probably safer, especially with what I've seen is the expanded list of indications that potentially is coming. It's being studied for addiction. It's being studied for type 1 diabetes with obesity. It's being studied for PCOS and pre and postmenopause weight issues because body fat distribution changes in that time of life. And so there's a lot of things being studied. And I was in a meeting with one of our larger clients, one of the first clients that I brought on at Capital RX. So obviously they're one of my favorites, right? Not that I have favorites. like you don't have favorite children, you don't really have favorite clients. But we were in the room with them and they were like, what should we be looking out for? And I go, your biggest risk is additional indications. And nobody else in the room said that. They were all like, well, it's new to market. None of that matters. What you're going to see is once all these other drugs come to market, you just see utilization spread out across all of them.
Yeah.
Except for maybe the Wegovy pill. That was one of the fastest transitions from injectables to orals because people don't like needles, frankly. And it was easier to take the pill. Now, let's see if that stands because the weight loss benefit on the pill isn't as great as it is on the shot. And the pill has to pass through the digestive system. And think about what the mechanism of action is. It slows digestion. So there's more side effects with the pill.
Interesting. All right. Last one. Thanks as always, Bridget, for coming on. What would you say is the most astonishing thing going on in the market right now? We've seen a ton of state and federal PBM reform initiatives. We've seen, obviously, we've talked a lot about the transition to biosimilars and the new oral GLP-1 medication. You've talked about your changing perspective. So in your seat on this side of the phone now, what would you say is the most astonishing thing going on that you're talking to people about?
The rapid change in PBM legislation. I did not have on my 2026 bingo card that Congress was going to pass PBM reform, but they did. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I think plan sponsors are hungry for it. I don't know if they quite understand how it's going to impact them. I feel very good being with an organization that's already there and somewhat future-proof, but there are more things coming, and I know that there is going to be additional legislation at both the state and federal level that impact plan sponsors and impact their drug spend in a both positive and potentially negative way. And my thought is that as an organization, we need to be well positioned to strategically advise our prospects and our clients and the consultant marketplace and anybody else who will listen to us on PBM reform, what it means for them, and what future changes we see on the horizon, because they did it, but they're just getting started.
All right. Well, thank you very much for coming on. Hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Astonishing Healthcare. Head over to judy.health and visit the Insights section for show notes and other relevant content. If you like this episode, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And definitely share the link to this show with your network. Have a great rest of your day.